Well, it's a part of virtually every Indian's diet, and that's dal. Now, in a huge worry for households in several parts of the country, there has been at least a 30% spike in the prices of dal over the last few weeks. In some places, it's almost 200 rupees a kilo now. In fact, there are reports from various places that people aren't eating it anymore. In fact, in some places, in Andhra Pradesh, for instance, chicken is less expensive than dal. Well, I spoke to Dr. Ashok Gulati, well-known agricultural economist, a little while earlier on why this was happening. Dr. Gulati, thank you very much for speaking to us on NDTV. Can you just explain to us very simply why are we seeing this rise in dal prices? What's happened?
Well, the dal prices, if you see, the story is like this. Our normal production is about 19 million tons. Now, last year, this production in 14-15 dropped by about 2 million tons. Now, on top of 19 million tons, we used to import about 4 million tons of pulses. So, our consumption roughly is around 23 million tons. Now, when there is a drop of 2 million tons, it is going to show some impact. Either the private sector should have imported much more, or the government should have taken some preemptive action well in time, and that was to import and keep it under its own control. You know, the price stabilization does not come free. That is the bottom line that you have to take. One way is continuously keep the imports open. Second is have some buffer stock on that basis. Third is continuously watch what is happening on the futures market. Now, either many of the commodities are not allowed under futures markets, or whatever was there that is being suspended, or the stocks with the warehouses, there is an order that you can't keep more than 500 tons, and suddenly the stocks which were known to the government where they are, they have gone underground or disappeared literally.
Well, Dr. Gulati, just some days ago, NDTV did an interview with the RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan, and he said to us that he feels the government has actually done a good job in managing inflation. Do you agree with him?
Well, at present, overall assessment of controlling food inflation, not only Mr. Raghuram Rajan, but the entire government thinks that they have controlled the food prices. If they have controlled the food prices, why can't they control the price of onion, and why can't they control the prices of pulses? The fact is, the global prices have collapsed. Our exports are not going out. Imports are increasing. Our analysis shows that 2/3 of control on food inflation is primarily because of global food situation. Now, what happens in case of pulses? We are the largest producer, we are the largest consumer, and we are the largest importer also. Therefore, when we go to the international market, in a thin global market, the prices also go up, and we have such archaic laws where stocking is not allowed, or overnight the stockist becomes a hoarder, and therefore we have no clue now how much stock is there in the country.
But, Dr. Gulati, the other question also is, how people's food habits are changing. Do you see people today moving to other foods? Are they moving more towards eggs and meat? I mean, the question is whether dal is still the poor man's food. Why is this issue of dal such a sensitive issue?
But if I am a vegetarian, my source of protein is primarily pulses or cheese. Yes, food habits are changing away. They are consuming less cereals, but not less pulses necessarily, particularly vegetarians like me. Yes, people are going for more meat, people are going for more milk, more fruits and vegetables, and therefore consumption patterns are changing. But pulses is such a thing which is very unique to India. As I said, we are the largest producer, we are the largest consumer, and we are the largest importer. So, pulses substitutability is somewhat less.
Well,
and India is the largest vegetarian country in the world today. Remember this.
Well, my final question then is, who is responsible for bringing this under control and tackling this issue? Is it the centre or is it the states?
Oh, it is the centre's responsibility to manage the economy, and therefore price front, particularly food inflation, is centre's responsibility. States cannot do much in this. because you have to dovetail your actions with the two things: trade policies, buffer stocking, and futures markets. Futures markets give you a signal what is likely to happen, so that you can take an action 3 months in advance. Either you have to import more or you have to stock, and all these actions also require, first thing is how much is the crop production. If you don't have proper handle on how much is the crop production in the country, then you are shooting in the dark, and that's where the problem is.
Well, Dr. Ashok Gulati, thank you for joining us on Left, Right and Centre today. Dr. Ashok Gulati, their leading agricultural economist, with some very strong words on the way the government has handled this entire crisis when it comes to the prices of dal. We've got two economists joining us tonight. Prasenjit Bose here in the studio with us from JP Morgan. We're joined by Sajid Chinoy from Mumbai. But let me bring this question first to Mr. Bhartendra Singh of the BJP. Mr. Singh, would you concede that there has been a mishandling of this entire issue, that the government should have been prepared and had some kind of a plan B?
Well, as Dr. Gulati has just pointed out, that this is a single-digit inflation after a long time that the government has achieved in food inflation. But the government doesn't have to be complacent about it. And the government is not complacent about it, because 3 circulars were issued. The first one saying to monitor prices to the state governments, the second one saying to check hoarders and not allow hoarding to take place, and the third one to say that food inflation should be checked efficiently. The government has imported 5,000 metric tons of million metric tons of pulses, and is going to import another 2,000 million metric tons. As we know, the monsoon failed, which we really can't blame on anybody. And because of the monsoon failing, as Dr. Gulati just pointed out, there has been a short production of 2,000 million tons. So we must keep this in mind. But having said all that, ultimately it is the state government that is responsible for the law and order and the Essential Commodities Act to make sure that people are not hoarding, and the central government that is sending the pulses and all these food essentials to the government.
There's no responsibility.
They should be handed out, and the public distribution systems are running well.
So when things are good, the centre, we should pat the centre on the back, but when things are bad, the states are to blame? Is that what it is?
No, the law and order situation, the ESMA, the Essential Commodities Act, which stops hoarding, is the state government's issue. The central government cannot really do anything about it. So it is not. It is a problem that we have. As Dr. Gulati correctly pointed out, we are a vegetarian country out of choice or out of compulsion, because people being poor cannot afford to eat meat and eggs. And so it is very important to maintain the correct nourishment going to the poorer people. We must keep pulses, the price of pulses in control. There are just 2 countries that are supplying the pulse that is used. Tur ki dal that is used by most of India, and especially the poor, and that is Myanmar and Tanzania.
Right. Before I get Sanjay into this, because I know this will lead to a political war of words, let me get Sajid Chinoy and Prasenjit into this first. Sajid Chinoy, according to you, how serious is this problem? I mean, we're almost looking at 200 rupees a kilo right now. Is it going to get worse? And, should the centre have anticipated this earlier? Who's to blame here? The states or the centre?
Nidhi, it's good to get some perspective here. Pulses inflation is undoubtedly a problem. It's running at 30% and has been in double digits for the last 7-8 months. Onion prices were high last month. But the fact is, if you look more generically and more holistically, food inflation has come down dramatically in India. Food inflation over the last 12 months has averaged 5% versus an average of 10% for the previous 3 years. So clearly, the government's doing something right. We should give them a little bit more credit than that. Have global factors helped? Absolutely. Global food prices are down 25% year on year. That's helping. So this is a combination of good luck and good policy. Cereals inflation is running at 1%. Vegetables are at 0. Milks at 1%. So there are no broad-based food inflation pressures. And the pulse problem is a long-standing one. This is not, I don't believe this is a question of hoarding for the last 2 months. You've had pulse inflation running above 15% for the last 9 months. There is a more fundamental issue here, that we have over-incentivized the production of rice and wheat for the last 10 to 15 years and therefore under-incentivized pulse production. As a consequence, you become a very large global importer, and when you become a very large global importer, you essentially begin to determine the global price. So that importing in times of need, like we've had to done this year, doesn't serve as any risk mitigating factor.
Okay,
we've had 2 bad monsoons. Bottom line is, it is a fundamental problem. We need to address it. But let's not mistake a pulse problem for a more generalized food inflation, which has not been the case over the last year.
That is an important point you make, and I want to take that to Prasanjit.
No, I don't agree with what all has been said at all.
So go ahead.
I think that, you know, these kind of complacent views that are coming from eminent economists, I mean, good luck to them. The problem is that the inflation problem in India has to an extent mitigated essentially because of global factors. All these people are underplaying them. There is a huge slowdown in the global economy which has been continuing for several years now. So global prices are falling everywhere. And it is actually surprising that in an overall situation where the global prices are coming down for every commodity in India, you have certain commodities, essential commodities like pulses, like onions till a few weeks back, they are showing such sharp spikes. Now there are many problems and many issues involved. I just want to flag 2 or 3 of them. Number one is, I think we should get out of this wrong policy approach that we have, that the Reserve Bank and its interest rates have got to do with something to do with food prices. They don't. We have to understand this. The Reserve Bank interest rate may determine certain prices, but definitely not food prices. Second, this spike in food prices, sometimes, you know, the sharp increases, etc., have got to do with hoarding and, you know, the pathetic state of generally warehousing and the entire food supply management chain in our country. But there is a larger, big problem which unfortunately Dr. Gulati or my other friend, he is not talking about, is that India, despite being, they are correctly pointing out that we are the biggest consumers of pulses. But why is the pulses production, why has it got stagnated over the years? That is a very big problem.
That's what Sajid Chinoy was pointing out, that there's an over-incentivization
don't pit it against,
for rice and wheat.
Our per capita consumption for cereals also is nothing compared to China.
No, but let me ask you this, Prasanjit. If broadly food inflation is down today from, say, a year ago, you wouldn't give the government any credit for that?
Well, I would say that inflation today, you look at any country data, it's not my claim. You just look at any country across the world, prices are going down. My point is that if there is a pulses problem, that pulses problem is happening because there are some structural issues. You look at the production data of pulses. How much of pulses do India produce, and look at the productivity levels and how they have stagnated over the years. The last government did some pulses mission, but nothing much happened out of that. So we have a production problem, and we have to remove our mindset of neglecting agriculture.
Okay, so let me take
There's a supply side issue. That's what I'm trying to say.
Sajid Chinoy makes the point that broad-based food inflation is down, and that is really the broad picture as far as inflation is concerned. Yes, the issue of dal is a problem, but don't confuse that you know, with a crisis situation as far as food inflation is concerned. Sanjay.
Nidhi, you have to, you know, put this perspective up front in this discussion, that this government, since it came into power through, you know, providence or whatever you might call it, and good luck to them on that, have had the benefit of a huge economic, you know, tailwind of a 55% fall in global oil prices, which has an impact on all kinds of input costs. So end of day, there is, you know, and other commodities as well have slumped internationally. So this government has actually done precious little to actually contain inflation, whether wholesale or food inflation. Because the bottom line, and Prasanjit is right there, that there is a deflationary downward spiral happening all over the country. So falling prices cannot be a credit for this government. If at all, the question that Mr. Singh, actually that's what I wanted to come in earlier, he talked about the fact that organized cartels is a state problem. But I need to tell Mr. Singh that some of the biggest hoarders in the country are in BJP ruled states. And what we would like to ask the Bharatiya Janata Party, that if supply side production bottlenecks is one issue for high prices, and we are not just talking about pulses and onion, you will see sporadic rise of certain food items because this government has not given any priority to agriculture. That's one of the reasons, Nidhi, why rural distress is high. Agriculture growth is down to 1.1%. I mean, if you have that kind of a unsustainable rural sector, you are headed for continuous conflicting situations where you will have falling prices, but food inflation will rise. And therefore, my point, organized cartels are in BJP-ruled states, and they have failed in supply bottlenecks.
I know you're in
reduction.
power in a few states, but I mean, come on, Maharashtra has been, especially under the Congress NCP rule, it's been famous for the kind of hoarding we've seen, especially of onions. Maharashtra is a famous example of that under the Congress rule. So it's not about Congress versus BJP, Sanjay, is it? Only.
No, Nidhi, the one point which you will have to agree, I mean, we lived with $122 a barrel price under the UPA, which collapsed dramatically around the middle of last year. So these things happen. I mean, it's part of the game. I mean, today the world is facing a slowdown. We faced a great recession. But I think the bottom line is Modi Sarkar has got absolutely no priority for the agriculture and rural sector. They are into this Make in India, get into the pink pages, make digital India noises. Where have you seen Mr. Narendra Modi go to the home of a single person who's committed a suicide from the farming community?